I'm Tian Wei, and this is World Insight. We begin with an eye on the worsening pandemic situation in Hong Kong. While the Special Administrative Region was successful in controlling the virus last year, recent COVID cases spiked to around 500,000. Chief Executive Carrie Lam on Wednesday said the city was still making plans for universal COVID-19 testing while focusing its resources on caring for the elderly residents amid the surge of infections.
There's a common view that we have to implement compulsory universal testing. And when we talk about this, it might not be just one test, but 2 tests or 3. Hopefully then, if there are still silent transmission chains or carriers, they could be identified and isolated. And in this way, Hong Kong could bring this wave of the pandemic to an end, or we could come out of this pandemic situation.
That's Carrie Lam, Chief Executive of Hong Kong. The central authorities in China has already sent several health experts to Hong Kong to help curb the latest outbreak. How can the city government better contain the COVID spread and get the city back on track? On the sidelines of this year's 2 sessions, I spoke to CPPCC member Kenneth Fok, who's also a member of the Hong Kong Legislative Council. He said he's grateful for the help from the central government and frontline medical staff. Besides the pandemic, he also touched on the mindset change of Hong Kongers in the past 25 years since the city returned to the motherland. Ken, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Wei.
What about the situations in Hong Kong? Earlier, you were talking on the sidelines of the 2 sessions about the latest.
So first of all, I would like to say that we're very grateful, for all the help we are getting from the central government, no matter on the professional help and also in terms of materials, medical supplies, or even, day-to-day materials that we're getting from the mainland. We had the pleasure of meeting Vice Premier Han Zheng a few days ago, and that was very it's very heartwarming. It's a very grave situation. A lot of Hong Kongers are in dire, the situations, to be frank. But I think having Mr. Han, saying that the central government is always behind us, giving us all the support, and I'm even more moved to hear him say that, he's been receiving a lot of calls from even different provinces, different cities around China, and even private corporations putting their hands up, willing to help Hong Kong. Practical solutions, I'm actually very happy as well. I'm receiving a lot of materials from different parties and hoping that I could help distribute to people. And we're getting masks, we're getting rapid test kits. I'm even, trying to secure food supplies, fruits and vegetables in case of a lockdown. So these are things that daily I talk to staff. And actually the problem we're getting now, funnily enough, it may not be the supplies. It's how to distribute. The logistics is a big problem now in Hong Kong. We have things, but we have to strike a balance. We don't want people to queue. We don't want people to come up to private, areas and to create a risk. But as we know, a lot of, say, logistic companies, even the Hong Kong Post, will be stopping because of the pandemic. So this is a big situation. We can't get supplies to the right people. So these are the things that we have to face, and we have to solve one by one.
Do you think some of the earlier experiences by some mainland cities could be of help in Hong Kong's case, even though the numbers in Hong Kong is much higher?
But I think at the end of the day, I think it's about whether we're prepared. We have to, I'm sure we'll ride this through in the end of the day. But, with the pandemic, who knows what's happening next? Touch wood, we don't want the 6th wave, but we can't say for definitely that it's not going to be here. So actually, there's another thing that Mr. Han Zheng mentioned is that, with the 2 years, China has really learned our way of dealing with the pandemic. And he mentioned in our big cities, they are always on alert, right? There are already isolation facilities. The supply is plenty. People with volunteer teams ready to go in a moment's notice. And in Hong Kong, we need to be prepared too. And sad to say, I feel that perhaps we've been too relaxed for the past year. We enjoyed 1 year of COVID-free situation, and in terms of isolation facilities, in terms of building a volunteer team and supplies, maybe we've been too complacent. So moving forward, I think we need to work with the mainland authorities on a united strategy on how to deal with the pandemic, because Hong Kong's number one priority now is to open the border with Guangdong. A lot of people are suffering because, people with factories or businesses in mainland. Me personally, I haven't been back to Guangzhou in 2 years. I've been to 2 sessions in a closed loop, but even this time, I don't dare to, go out and venture off because for business. So I think this is number one, and this goes hand in hand with how do we deal with the pandemic, because we can't put the mainland and Guangdong at risk because of a different strategy. So this is something that I think the government has to think about.
Some have been arguing Hong Kong's uniqueness to a certain extent. For example, communication with different groups of people living in Hong Kong, not necessarily even Hong Kongers themselves. Some are just working and living in Hong Kong from very different cultures. And it is a huge mega city, even though Hong Kong is practicing dynamic zero policy. Your take?
Yes, I think we embrace the differences, but at the end of the day, we are a city within China. So I think a lot of communication, we need to be more open. I don't think we can't just focus ourselves on differences and the different way of life or different policy making. I think in terms of policy now, not just in COVID, I think, but in all city government-wise policy, we need to be in line with China. We need to really treasure what the positioning that the mainland China has given us. The 8 centers, for example, finance, logistics, innovation, for example, and culture. These are the positions that we could contribute to the bigger picture. So I think this differences in the way of life, in a way, gives us an advantage, and we should make use of this advantage. But again, I think unity is a big thing. We need to work closer together, more communications.
How do you see this change of, if I could use the word mindset, vis-a-vis some of the challenges Hong Kong is absolutely going through over the past few years?
Change in mindset of the. No, I think it's good. I think it's good, especially in the new era and also within the new patriots governing Hong Kong situation with the 90 new elected LegCo members. I think the expectation, not just from central government, but expectation from the people, is that we need to be doing more. Right? It's not just about debating and playing the blame game. Hopefully that era is gone. After all these legislations, the new election system. So now we have to put our words into action. And pushing government's one thing, but I think we need to do it ourselves. So, for example, my constituency, I represent sports and culture. And moving forward, how do we use sports and culture into integration into the mainland? That's something that I need to focus on. So on the small scale, when the pandemic subsides, I would be doing more of these tours on exchanges and cooperation between our sports people, our cultural people, and the Greater Bay Area. There's not the government's legislation, but I feel that I need to be doing it or leading these projects to give them opportunity to go in. And the second thing is, I think, since we're talking about this topic, I think it's important also to change the mindset. In terms of culture and sports, in China and the mainland, they are not just talking about the number of shows or how many medals we get at the Olympics, but we are hoping that sports and culture can really be a new economic driver for the whole country, and for young people to be able to benefit from sports and culture, not just as a sportsman, but the sports industry, cultural industry as a whole. But in Hong Kong, it's still government driven. So government every year, they spend X amount of money into subsidizing shows and events, right? So I think in Hong Kong, I think we need to really start building or start allowing them to really embrace the idea of turning sports and culture into an industry.
You got some experiment ground already, Kenneth, one could argue, because you are being invited by the chief executive to be on the board for the West Kowloon Cultural District, which is a huge cultural project for Hong Kong and anyone visiting Hong Kong. You have also been, playing a very active role in sports. For example, being the vice chair of the Olympic Committee for Hong Kong. So tell me more about how you are specifically looking at some of the initiatives, how you are already doing your work.
Okay. I think two things. I think to follow on with what I was saying just now, this West Kowloon is definitely a new opportunity. Okay, I think for the culture scene, West Kowloon is very, very important moving forward. But I don't see West Kowloon as just a place with a lot of facilities. But I think what's important is to strengthen West Kowloon's position in terms of how do we want to take the cultural industry. In China, we have a lot of strong industry, a lot of players, even internet companies, high-tech companies who are involved in creation of a culture. We're not talking about shows. We're not just talking about contents. We're talking about, say, IP creation. We're talking about all this. So I think West Kowloon could really fulfill a role here too, and really actively seek opportunities for these companies to come to Hong Kong and help Hong Kong, cultural artists and people in the industry to gain this kind of business or industry related knowledge. So this is something that I would be doing myself. And you mentioned in terms of sports, I think sports is also, the Chinese government has given us a good opportunity. In 2025, we are going to host the national games with Guangdong and Macau. The way I see it, it's not just a game. I'm 100% confident on the ability for the Guangdong government to host any mega event sports. Okay, this is not the problem. The stadiums, the logistics, everything will be perfect. But how do we use this opportunity to set up a system so that the three places, Hong Kong, Macau, can work together? And this is what I'm doing moving forward, is hopefully, especially young people, how do we use this opportunity to let more young people to understand the GBA? So this is what I'll be doing.
I feel a lot of can-do spirit. It is filling my room, in fact, right now, just listening to what you have been talking about. But, people would say it's not that easy. I just don't know, for a young legislative council member like you, how would you be able to push things forward?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's right. You got to talk the talk, but you got to do the show, right? I think that's this important thing. I think it takes time. I think looking back 3 years, the Greater Bay Area the plan is unveiled for many years already, right? At the beginning, I still remember many years ago, we say, oh, it's so close to go to Guangzhou, everyone should try. And I get feedback, say, of course, if it's easier said, but the cost and everything involved is high. But we've seen the past 3 years, actually, in terms of cost and time and everything, we've been working slowly but surely to break down barriers. Yes, it takes time. It takes time. But there are progress being made in terms of a system of integration. So on this end, we would encourage more people just to take the leap and try. Secondly, how do we promote the success story? How do we make sure that it will be easier, especially for young people in Hong Kong? In the new policies, they are now, the group that I'm involved with, the Hong Kong Youth Association, they have set up different stations and offices in mainland China, a hotline to help young people to start their business, to learn about the business environment, to know about the law, how do you open a bank account, and all these things, how do you open a telephone card, how do you get, social security, what to do in a hospital. These are things that, the day-to-day living. People might feel foreign, but we are trying our little bit to be able to help.
You bring a lot of energy, Kenneth, and it's like a breath of fresh air in a way, to see a legislative council member like you act, think, and speak very differently from maybe the previous generations.
And it's not just me. I think with this new system in LegCo, what we're seeing is a lot of people of my generation, they're actually willing to contribute to Hong Kong. In the previous, I wouldn't divide it by generation or age, but in the previous system in Hong Kong, we are seeing a lot of conflict. And even though a lot of people are willing to help and step out, they did not do so. But now with the new system, I think a lot of people they're really go-getters and doers. They're really willing to contribute in any way they can, not just in LegCo, but outside. So I think we have to keep positive. And what I'm doing, especially for my constituency, is really hoping to provide opportunities. How do we, take a lead in organizing programs, be it mobilizing people. But one thing that I pledged in my electoral campaign is really to bridge different sectors. I think we are in times of unity. This time, when we're in Beijing, even the CPPCC report and the government work report, a big common theme is unity. How do we get unified? How do we push it forward? So I think in terms of Hong Kong, I think I'm lucky enough to have different resources in different fields, not just sports and culture, maybe in business as well, even in mainland China or internationally. How do we pull these resources together to better our sector? I think that's important as well. These are things that take time, but I think if there's a will, there's a way.
Dare to think, dare to dream.